Hey guys, tonight we're waking up somewhere cold. Really cold. Not snowy field and fireplace poster cold, more like damp rush mattress, smoke in your throat. Did someone steal the blanket again? Cold. Welcome to a timber-framed cottage in 15th century England. You're a woman in the late medieval period, and you probably already have chores waiting. But first, you need to disentangle yourself from a very scratchy woolen blanket. Try not to bump your head on the low beams, and maybe, just maybe, survive another day. And honestly, you probably won't. But let's pretend. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and the local time. I love seeing where and when people are listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake to a gray light leaking through your cottage's single oiled linen window. It's not exactly bright, it never really is, but enough to know you overslept. You sit up on a lumpy straw mattress, stuffed with a little more mouse than you'd like. You scratch at your woolen night shift and inhale the scent of damp wood, smoke, and slightly rancid fat. Your husband's already gone. Or maybe you're a widow. That would be complicated but possibly less noisy. Either way, the fire's out, your feet are bare, and you've got a day full of labor waiting whether your back's ready or not. Your breath puffs out in front of you. There's no insulation, no chimney, just a hole in the roof if you're lucky. You shuffle to the hearth and poke at the ashes, hoping for a coal that didn't die overnight. You don't find one. Time to coax a new fire from damp kindling with flint, patience, and a few whispered curses in Middle English. Once it's going, weakly, you throw on a kettle of water to heat. Not for tea, no. For something closer to porridge, maybe yesterday's bread boiled with a little ale and dried peas. It's not glamorous, but it's what you've got. Breakfast isn't really a thing unless you're nobility, and even then, it's usually just wine and bread. For you, it's whatever keeps your knees from shaking before noon. You slip into your kirtle, a long wool dress, brown or gray because you're not rich enough to wear colors with names, and fasten your belt. A knife, a pouch, a cloth. You tuck your hair into a linen coif and wrap a kerchief around your shoulders. Ready? You open the front door, which is more a wooden slab on a hinge, and step into the world, and it smells like boiled lentils and regret. Your neighbor is already shouting the price of yesterday's grains from her stall in the alley. A dog runs past, holding something unidentifiable in its mouth. You wave to the baker's wife, who gives you a polite nod and promptly sneezes into her apron. You turn away and tell yourself it's just the chill. And now your chores begin. First, stop. Water. The well is at the far end of your street, and it's already surrounded by women. You carry your bucket, wooden, iron-banded, heavy even when empty, and join the queue. Everyone's muttering about sore backs, sick husbands, failing sheep. You nod where appropriate, offer a small joke, and try not to sound too cheerful. Joy can be suspicious. One woman talks about a neighbor who died last night. Slipped away. In her sleep, she says. You all nod. You all know that could mean anything from fever to childbirth to, the priest said it was her time. By the time you return, your arms ache. The water sloshes, spilling over your skirts. You don't complain. Complaining makes things worse. Back inside, you wash your face in a bowl and scrape your teeth clean with a birch twig. Toothpaste? Not invented yet. Dentists? Mostly barbers with pliers. You take a quick look in a shard of polished metal, your only mirror, and sigh. You look tired. You always do. You hear the church bell toll. That means the sun's up and the day's truly begun. Time to fetch kindling, clean the rushes off the floor, skim the fat from the cooled broth, mend your son's tunic, and maybe, if you're really lucky, sit down to spin wool for a whole 10 minutes without interruption. And that's the fantasy version. Your hands are already raw from the cold and the scrubbing and the sand you use as soap. Your knees hurt from kneeling on stone. And when you finally do pause, It's only to look out the window and see storm clouds rolling in. Rain again. Historians still argue whether the average peasant woman in 15th century England truly believed her life was harder than a man's. But you're not arguing. You're just trying to keep the fire lit and the roof from leaking on the cheese. By mid-morning you've already done more labor than most modern gym-goers. You haven't eaten anything hot. You haven't spoken more than 10 words to a man. And you're already thinking about what to reboil for supper. A child cries in the distance. A rooster crows again, for no good reason. And you? You just keep going, because there's no such thing as stopping. Not in this century. You've barely rubbed the sting out of your hands when it's time to get back to work. The morning's only just begun, but your arms already feel like sacks of wet barley. There's no time for aches. Not in a world where everything that keeps you alive depends on what you can carry, cook, or clean. You trudge outside again, this time with a bundle of damp sticks tucked under your arm. The fire sputtered out during breakfast. Again? You knew it would. English mornings in spring, or is it late winter? Honestly, it's hard to tell. Come with fog so thick it sneaks in under the doorframe like a cold cat. Down the muddy alley, you pass another woman bent over a bucket, scrubbing laundry with knuckles like bark. You wave and she half smiles through clenched teeth. You know that look. It's the same one you wear when your shoulders threaten mutiny. Today's agenda? The invisible labor of keeping things from falling apart. Not heroic things. Not noble, knightly, or even poetic. Just scrubbing, hauling, sweeping, preserving, patching, steeping, mending, and pretending not to hear your knees creak. You begin with firewood. Every stick is soaked. You have to layer them carefully, coals at the base, and whisper to the flames like they owe you money. Once the fire finally catches, you press the copper pot down on the grate and breathe in the steam. Warmth is a small miracle. Next you dump the rushes from the floor. The sweet-smelling herbs you scattered last week, chamomile, lavender, pennyroyal, have long been trampled and turned into a muddy compost. You gather the old rushes into a basket and scatter fresh ones with a flick of your wrist. The smell is strong and sharp and almost pleasant, like clean hay with dreams of being perfume. You hear the neighbor's goose honk 3 times in a row. Bad sign, or maybe that's just what it always does. Someone knocks. You open the door with caution, because no one knocks without a reason. It's a girl, maybe 11, clutching a folded cloth. "Mother sent bread," she says, voice small. You thank her, hand her a cracked wooden cup of warm broth, and nod at her to drink. She does, fast. Her cheeks are red with windburn. Before she leaves, she whispers, "My uncle's sick." Just that. Quiet and fast, like she's worried someone might hear her say it aloud. You don't ask what kind of sick. You never do. You just press the cloth she brought into your hands and watch her disappear into the fog. You unfold the cloth. 2 rolls, still warm. You break one and find a dead fly inside. You eat it anyway. It's protein. Later, you carry a wooden tub down to the stream. Yes, the aqueduct is still working, but today's bathwater isn't for drinking. This is for soaking linens, some of which haven't seen a wash in weeks. You sit on a flat stone, knuckles deep in cold water, beating the cloth with a paddle. Like it insulted your mother. Your fingers go numb quickly, and the sensation becomes almost meditative. Slosh, slap, ring. Slosh, slap, ring. The stream gurgles beside you. A distant cow lowing. Someone arguing over the price of barley. This is peace, in its own terrible way. Of course, peace doesn't last. You slip on a mossy patch on your way up and slam your shin into a rock. It swells immediately. You mutter something under your breath and keep hobbling. There's no time to sit. Sitting is for the dead. Back home, you hang the linens across a rope that cuts the one-room cottage nearly in half. Every time you move, you brush against cold, damp fabric like living inside a ghost's laundry day. Now, the kettle's ready again. You pour the hot water over some crushed nettles and dried apple peel. It's not tea, but it's better than chewing raw barley for hydration. You sip, savoring the faint trace of sweetness, and try not to think about how many more times you'll do this today. The door creaks. You groan. This time it's your cousin, red-faced and winded from running up the alley. "You coming to gather?" she asks. Her breath puffs out in bursts. She's already halfway to the common meadow. The alder roots are thawed enough to dig. So you grab your gathering sack, tie on a second scarf, and follow. You and 4 other women spend the next hour digging in the wet earth for edible greens, early roots, and anything not already picked clean by animals or children. You find a small clump of wild leeks, a patch of chickweed, and, miracle of miracles, a nearly whole parsnip. No one talks much. Everyone's busy with their own prayers, silent and muddy. When you return home, your legs are shaking. You dump your haul on the table and stare at it like it owes you rent. Then you sigh and begin sorting it. The parsnip you'll save for supper. The chickweed goes into the soup pot with yesterday's bones. The leeks? Those are for flavor and show. You mash some barley with a little salt and shape it into flat cakes. Into the pan they go, hissing faintly over the low fire. You fan the smoke away with your apron and hope the neighbors don't come sniffing. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant women truly understood the nutritional balance of their diets, but when you've got 1 leek, half a parsnip, and dreams of cheese, balance becomes theoretical. By the time the cakes are crisp and the soup vaguely resembles food, the sun's beginning its long descent behind the trees. You sit on the stool and take your first bite of the day that doesn't taste like regret, and then you start peeling turnips for tomorrow. You're barely 3 bites into your turnip peeling when a thump rattles your shutter. It's the wind, or a rock, or a child chasing a chicken through the alley. Honestly, all 3 are likely. You glance out the narrow window slit, just in time to see your neighbor's son, shirtless, barefoot, and completely unbothered, chasing something that might be dinner. You return to your turnip, which refuses to peel itself. In 15th century England, a woman's work is endless, cyclical, and mostly thankless. But perhaps the most revealing part of the day isn't the work itself. It's what's expected of you once your belly's full and the bread is baked. Participation in society's tightly stitched quilt of hierarchy. This morning you're summoned. You tie up your hair, rinse your hands, and walk briskly toward the edge of the village, where the market cart is stuck again, the wheels mired in mud, the ox is exhausted, and the driver, Walter, is red-faced and swearing under his breath. You and the other women gather at the wheel, heaving together, skirts hiked and fingers muddy. With a wet pop, the cart lifts. Everyone cheers weakly. Walter, of course, nods solemnly like he moved it with his mind. Moments like these remind you that community is more survival than kindness. If you don't show up to help, someone will remember. If you speak too loudly, someone else will. If you so much as scowl at the wrong moment, well, the village doesn't forget. You're not just a woman, you're a peasant woman, and that means your place is about 10 feet beneath where the Lord Steward believes he stands. You walk toward the center of the hamlet, where the Reeves posted another parchment on the stocks. You can't read, but someone always does. It aloud. Today it's your cousin. By order of the manor court, bread must not be sold above 1 farthing unless containing meat. Which is hilarious, because who's putting meat in bread? A few women mutter under their breath. Prices rise, wages do not. But arguing changes nothing, unless you enjoy the feel of cold iron stocks around your neck. Speaking of markets, today is market day. You tuck your woven basket under your arm, smooth your apron, and step into the crowd. The market is a chaos of noise and smells. Onions, wet wool, goats, cheap ale, roasting barley. You hear 5 arguments in 3 minutes and dodge 2 runaway children before you've even reached the egg seller. You're not here to sell much. A few bundles of dried herbs, some leftover tallow, and, if the steward doesn't notice, a pair of woolen gloves you finished late last night. Technically, women aren't supposed to trade finished goods unless it's sanctioned or for their lord. But practically, you do what you must. The egg seller snorts when you offer him a trade. 3 leeks for 4 eggs. He counters with 2 eggs and an insult about your leeks. You settle on 3 eggs and call it a victory. You're about to leave, when a man with too many teeth and too few manners stops you. "Got any spare yeast?" he asks. You shake your head, say nothing, and move on. You've learned not to offer explanations, especially to men who think your silence is flirtation. You stop by the cloth merchant, not to buy, heavens no, but to touch. The feel of wool woven tight, linen that's not been mended 6 times, even a bolt of imported silk impossibly fine. You run your fingers over it, just once. "Don't even think about it," the merchant says, not unkindly. "I'm thinking," you say, and move along. Around the edge of the market square, you spot 3 young wives gossiping under the guise of bartering. You join them briefly, enough to hear that Agnes's youngest has a fever, and that someone saw a fox near the chickens again. And did you hear about the midwife? You haven't. Apparently she's been summoned to the manor. The steward's wife is in confinement, again, and she's paying with honey and herbs. Better than coin, honestly. Historians still argue whether midwives in this period held true authority or operated in tolerated liminality. But you? You know one thing for sure. When people are scared, they either kneel to you or blame you. You sell your herbs to an old man with 3 teeth and a strange smell. He offers you a scrap of cheese in change. You take it, even if it smells like regret and old boots. Back home, you put away your humble haul, then return to the path outside to sweep mud from your threshold. It's a foolish gesture. More will appear by sunset, but it's your way of claiming a bit of order in a world that obeys none. Just as you straighten, you see them. 2 noble women pass, riding side saddle with veils that flutter like banners. One wears indigo, the other saffron, colors you're forbidden to wear unless you're of their class. Their shoes have real soles. Their gloves are lined. They don't look at you, not really, but their horses do. You feel a brief sting of something, not quite envy, not quite bitterness, just the weight of the difference. Their lives might be filled with rules and restrictions, but at least they're soft ones. Yours are hard, heavy, hand-washed. They vanish down the road in a spray of hoofbeats. You return to your sweeping. Evening is beginning to tug the light sideways, and the smells from hearths are shifting. Stew, smoke, maybe something sweet. You'd give anything for a bite of honey. Instead, you light your tallow candle, check the pot on your fire, and settle in to stitch another seam. Your fingers are tired, but the tunic needs mending, and your son, if you have one, has outgrown everything but his bad habits. The cat rubs against your leg. You smile. One soft thing today. You prick your thumb with the needle and mutter a curse. 1 drop of blood. Nothing to worry about. Unless someone saw it and thought it meant something. More? You glance at the window, just in case. The next morning arrives like a complaint. You can't return. Gray, damp, and somehow louder than it should be. Roosters argue. Geese plot. Someone's child is crying about a lost shoe that probably melted in yesterday's mud. You wake up stiff and a little damp yourself, your straw mattress having lost its will to support. You shift, stretch, and immediately regret both. Your knees click like wooden dice in a cup. Today, you're reminded of the real weight behind the phrase, marriageable age. At around 12, if you're not already promised, you're the subject of serious discussion by everyone except yourself. You tug on your second-best kirtle and step into your shoes, which are more ambition than footwear at this point. Outside, the air smells like damp wool and boiled cabbage. You blend into the bustle of daily movement, neighbors hauling kindling, boys chasing pigs, someone loudly regretting last night's ale. Marriage is in the air, not love, mind you. That's not the same thing. In 15th century England, marriage is less about companionship and more about livestock, linen, and land. You remember when your sister married. She cried quietly the night before. Her husband was twice her age and had breath that could pickle herring, but he had a roof with 2 chimneys, So everyone said she was lucky, and she might have been. You, on the other hand, are currently the subject of quiet glances and loud silences. Your aunt mentioned a tanner in the next village over. Widower, 3 children, 1 eye, good income. You're expected to feel grateful. You don't. Still, you tidy your hair with a scrap of ribbon that smells faintly of elder flowers. First impressions matter even when you're being bartered like a particularly willful goat. At the village green, 2 other girls your age are whispering near the well. One is already betrothed to a baker's apprentice. The other hopes for a shepherd. They don't talk much, she says, dreamily. You draw water, let it splash your wrists, and wonder if being unmarried past 20 really is as shameful as everyone says. Historians still argue whether peasant women had real autonomy in choosing their husbands. But in your world, choice feels more like nudging a boulder than steering a cart. Later in the day, you find yourself summoned to assist with preparations for a betrothal feast. Not your own. Thankfully, a girl barely 13 is being promised to a butcher's son with a chin like a shovel. You help lay out trenchers, thick slices of stale bread that serve as plates, along the trestle table. You sprinkle dried herbs over boiled beans to hide their bitterness. You glance at the bride-to-be. She's picking at her nails. Her mother beams like a saint in a stained glass window. You quietly hope the beans aren't too bitter. Nearby, a man boasts about the size of the dowry. 2 goats, a corner of barley field, and an iron pot. The girl's father swells with pride. Her mother fusses with her veil. The girl stares straight ahead, as if memorizing the floor. A chicken escapes the yard and causes 5 minutes of chaos. Everyone laughs, except the girl. She doesn't blink. That night, you think of what your own dowry might include. A comb with 2 teeth missing, a half-woven shawl, possibly the cat if she can be convinced. Back at home, your uncle pulls you aside. He speaks softly, like it's a kindness. You're not getting younger, he says, as if 15 is a final bell. You need security, someone steady. You want to ask, what about joy? But your tongue stays still. Joy doesn't feed. You? Joy doesn't gather firewood. You nod. Later, by the hearth, your neighbor's niece tells a story about a girl who refused to marry. She ran off, lived in the woods, and was eaten by wolves, or became a witch, or maybe married a sailor. The details vary, but the lesson is always clear. Marry, or become someone else's cautionary tale. You smile politely, but your jaw aches. Outside, someone sings a lullaby with a voice like rough wool. The fire cracks, the kettle hisses. The days. Tension soaks into your bones like cold rain. You remember a brief moment last summer, picking berries alone in the hedgerow, no one calling your name, no one watching your hands. It felt like flight, or something close. You think of that moment often. It feels important. It feels forbidden. You sip your tea, nettle and apple peel again, and stare into the fire. The embers pulse like a heartbeat. You wonder what happens to girls who say no. Not in the stories, but in the real muddy paths between fields and rumors. You suspect you already know. Still, you wonder. It's not even dawn when you hear the scratching. Not rats, those are louder. This is gentler, more rhythmic. You rise slowly, brush straw from your sleeve, and peek through the shutter. It's her again. Mother Elswythe, the midwife. She moves. Through the mist, like she's made of it, wrapped in layers of russet wool, leaning slightly on her ashwood walking stick. She doesn't knock. She never knocks. She just waits. You throw on your cloak and step outside. Today's not about weddings. Today's about births. The baker's wife is in labor. Early, according to whispers, though time is loose and no one writes these things down. What's not? Loose is pain, and she's deep in it. You and 2 others follow Elswythe down the crooked lane, past shuttered windows and a rooster trying to remember how to crow. You've assisted births before, but each one is a new kind of chaos, a private storm in a very public sky. Inside the baker's house, it's dark and warm and smells like sweat, lavender, and anxiety. The woman lies on a pallet, clutching a rolled-up blanket, biting it so hard you expect teeth marks in the wool. Her husband stands nearby, helpless and wide-eyed, kneading the same piece of dough over and over. No one tells him to leave. He'll go eventually. They always do. Midwives are trusted, but only to a point. People come to them in desperation, not reverence. They're keepers of life, death, blood, secrets. But step too far, show too much knowledge, the line between healer and heretic gets whisper thin. Historians still argue whether midwives were medical professionals or tolerated anomalies. What you know is this: if the birth goes well, the gods are praised. If it goes badly, someone starts. Watching the midwife's house at night. You wash your hands in vinegar and boil the herbs Elsweith requests: mugwort, yarrow, a pinch of sage. You prepare the swaddling cloths, check the water, keep the fire steady. Then you wait, and wait. The woman cries out, curses in a mix of prayer and profanity, and then falls into a panting rhythm. Elsweith works with quiet intensity, her hands practiced and firm. Hours pass. It's like holding your breath with your whole body. Finally, the baby comes. Small, slick, squalling like an offended chicken. You hand Elsweith the cloth and step back. The mother sobs, part relief, part exhaustion. The husband drops his dough. No one scolds him. You clean. Quietly, carefully. There's always a moment, after the first cries, before the fire's stoked again, when time feels soft and everything else fades, just for a breath. Then it's gone. The baby is a girl. That fact hangs in the air like steam from the kettle. The mother kisses her head anyway. The husband nods, then quietly begins reshaping his expectations. Girls are blessings and burdens. It depends who's speaking and whether someone's listening. Back outside, the sky is a bright, bleak gray. You feel the ache in your back as soon as you stop moving. Elsweith thanks you with a nod. No words. She rarely speaks unless necessary. You suspect she likes it that way. You head home, passing the tanner's wife airing goat hides on a line. She sniffs as you pass and mutters, "Another mouth?" You don't reply. People say things when they're tired, or when they're scared, or just mean. At your door, you pause. You've seen 5 births this year. One ended in silence. The others. A few whimpers, 2 fevered mothers, and 1 baby with a foot like a curled root. No one calls you healer. But they come when it matters. That means something. Inside, the fire is long dead. You relight it with the last of your dry kindling and heat a bit of milk to drink. It's sour, still warm. You think of the new baby. What will she become? Will she learn to read? Unlikely. Will she marry before her voice deepens? Probably. Will she know anything of the world beyond this mud-wrapped village? That one's harder. You think about writing her name in the air, just once, so it's seen somewhere, but she doesn't have one yet. In the meantime, you mend the tear in your hem. The stitch slips through the wool, steady and sure. Outside, the wind begins again. Soft at first, then bolder, like it has opinions. You wonder if the baby will grow into her mother's life, or if something stranger waits. Maybe she'll be like Elsweith. Maybe she'll run away. Or maybe, like you, she'll quietly carry everyone else's stories until her own becomes too heavy to lift. The candle flickers low. You let it. You don't need light to stitch, just something worth finishing. The rooster forgets himself again the next morning. It's still dark when he begins, proud and delusional. You roll over on your straw mattress, blink into the pitch, and consider pretending to sleep just long enough to make the day chase you. For once. But of course, it wins. You pull on your cloak and boots, still damp from yesterday's slog through the stream, and step into the yard. Just as the frost clings to everything it can, the air bites your face. The sky is so pale it looks undecided. Today's task is one of those chores no one enjoys, but everyone endures. Laundry. It's laundry day. You gather your linens, shirts, rags, and the ever-rebellious underdress with the ripped hem, and head toward the washing site near the stream. The path is lined with mossy stones and smells faintly of sheep and cold water. At the stream, other women are already there, kneeling on flat stones, sleeves rolled, voices rising in tired rhythm. There's a kind of intimacy in communal labor. Complaints, whispered. Stories shared, laughter sudden and sharp. You join in silently, dunking the linens into the numbing stream, then scrubbing them over the washboard with lye soap and elbow grease. Your fingers go red within minutes. One woman next to you is humming something that might be a hymn or a warning. Another is scolding a toddler trying to eat a button. You smile and return to the rhythm. Soak, scrub, wring, repeat. Laundry is hard, brutal work. It smells of wood ash, sweat, and cold. It wrecks your hands. Still, there's something almost meditative about it, if you forget about your frozen knuckles. One woman mentions that her cousin's cousin was recently accused of stealing a bit of wool from her master's house. The punishment? Not a fine, but public shaming and 3 days in the stocks. You cluck your tongue sympathetically. Historians still argue whether medieval punishments were more about justice or spectacle. You're pretty sure the answer is both. As you wring out your third tunic, a raven lands nearby. It watches, tilts its head, then caws once before flying off. In your village, that's either a good omen or a very bad one, depending on whom you ask. You decide not to ask. By mid-morning, your arms ache and your fingernails have forgotten what warmth is. You pin the wet clothes to a line strung between trees and let the winter sun do its best impersonation of heat. You glance down the hill and spot the reeve pacing near the manor house. He's holding a long list and a longer scowl. You know that. Look, it means head counts, or taxes, or both. You duck behind a sheet and pretend to be invisible. Soon after, you help gather twigs for kindling, breaking them into bundles with the same care you might give to bone. You stop only when your apron can carry no more. As you trudge home, you spot something strange. Chalk marks on a door near the edge of the village. 3 lines, a loop, and a cross. Protective charms, or warnings. It depends again on whom you ask. Last week, a pig died under odd circumstances. The owner swore it coughed before it collapsed. The local priest offered a prayer. The villagers offered suspicions. You pass that door a little faster. Back at your own threshold, you shake out the last drops of river water from your skirt and settle in to prepare the evening meal. Turnips again, with a sprinkle of dried onion, and a single hopeful garlic clove. A knock interrupts you. It's your cousin, all wind-burned cheeks and urgency. Her eldest has a toothache, and someone said you had something for that. You do. Cloves, soaked in vinegar, mashed into a paste. You apply it with a cloth and whisper a calming rhyme. The child winces, then sighs. It helps. A little. Word will spread. Your cupboard of dried leaves and bottled brews will become even more interesting to the village. You're careful not to. Let it look like magic. Not that kind of magic. As the day fades, you light your little oil lamp and sit by the hearth. Your back is sore, your fingers raw. But the linens are drying, the stew is simmering, and the child with the toothache is sleeping. You think of your mother who scrubbed the same stones, whispered the same rhymes, who once told you that women carry the world on their shoulders, but only the clever ones pretend it's a basket of apples. You smile at that. Tomorrow brings more work. It always does. But tonight you have this quiet, this pot of soup, this moment of breath, unburdened. Just for a while. The morning air feels like punishment, cold enough to bite, damp enough to cling. You tug your cloak tighter and make your way down the cobbled path, passing closed shutters and piles of firewood, slick with frost. Today is not for chores. Today, you've been asked to visit the priory. Not everyone gets invited to the priory. It sits just outside the village, its pale stone walls peeking through frostbitten hedges, always just a little too clean, too silent. The nuns live there, sisters sworn to prayer, to poverty, and to each other. For some it's a haven, for others, a cage. You've never been beyond the outer yard. The sister who meets you at the gate is small, wrapped in thick wool, her wimple pulled so snug it creaks when she nods. "This way," she murmurs, and you follow. Inside, it smells like beeswax and old books. The air is warmer than you expected, quiet too, like the building is holding its breath. You're not here for punishment or prayer, thank the saints. You've been brought to help with mending. The sisters spin wool, weave linen, and sew garments, not only for themselves, but for trade and alms. It's how they sustain the priory. Today, a cartload of tunics needs repair before the next delivery. Your fingers twitch just looking at the pile. You take a seat near a narrow window. The sister hands you a needle, already threaded. "Straight seams," she says, "and small stitches." You get to work. As you sew, the silence grows cozy. Someone begins humming a plainchant melody, low and slow, like warm honey over bread. You don't know the words, but it settles into your spine like comfort. Across from you, two young sisters debate the best dye for wool. One insists madder root gives the richest red. The other swears by cochineal, even though it's hard to come by. You listen, learning more in an hour here than in months of gossip outside the walls. Historians still argue whether convents were places of empowerment or confinement. For some women, they were the only route to education, literacy, even leadership. For others, they were a last resort, too poor to marry, too plain to bargain, or simply in the way. You steal a glance at the scriptorium. Through the open archway, a lone sister leans over a manuscript, brush in hand, painting fine red letters along the margins. Her posture is rigid. Her focus? Absolute. You want to ask her what she's writing, but something about the stillness keeps you in place. The nun beside you leans closer. We copy saints' lives and old romances, and sometimes little bits of ourselves. You nod. That feels true. By midday, the room smells of boiled cabbage and barley stew. You're invited to stay for the meal. You accept, grateful. The dining hall is long and narrow, the benches polished from years of habit. The nuns eat in near silence, save for one reading aloud from a holy book. Her voice is dry but clear, a soft metronome between spoonfuls. Your bowl is warm. The bread is coarse but fresh. You eat slowly, trying not to slurp. Afterwards, you're given a short tour of the herb garden. It's bare now. Winter has laid it low, but the labels remain. Rue, betony, pennyroyal, sage, all grown by the sisters, all used in their care. A sister named Agnes tells you how they use dried mint for headaches, tansy for worms, and rose hips for sorrow. Not everything has a cure, she says, but some things can be soothed. You file that away. Before you leave, one sister presses a small packet into your hand. "For your cousin's baby," she says. Inside, it's a mixture of chamomile, fennel seed, and dried lavender. "Sleep and comfort," she adds. You thank her with your eyes more than your mouth. You walk home slowly, watching your breath curl in the cold air. The quiet from the priory follows you. It clings to your cloak, tucks into your boots. You wonder briefly what life would have been like if you'd chosen that path. A life of discipline, yes, but maybe also of safety. No husband to answer to. No children to bury, just ink and thread and God. But that life isn't yours. Yours is one of muddy hems and frost-bitten mornings, of onions and vinegar and sometimes laughter, of scrubbing until your hands forget softness and healing when no one else will try. You reach home just as the light begins to fade. Inside, the fire's out again. You don't curse it. You just get to work. Later, as you steep the herb bundle in hot water, The scent curls into your chest and settles there. Sleep and comfort, she said. You hope it's true? By the time the next morning lumbers in, your hands are stiff from sewing, your shoulders aching from laundry, and your brain still half-tangled in the silence of the priory. But today is not quiet. Today it's market day, and market day means two things: crowd watching and being watched. You rummage through your chest for your cleanest smock. It's not new, but it's unstained. That'll do. You add a brown wool kirtle over top and tie a faded indigo apron around your waist. The sun hasn't fully climbed over the trees, but already the streets hum with feet and fire smoke. You're just about to leave when your neighbor, Ellen, the weaver's daughter, catches your arm. "You can't wear that," she hisses, eyeing your apron like it's a crime scene. "That blue is too rich." You blink. It's not even bright blue, just slightly less brown than usual. "Sumptuary law," she whispers, as if the word itself might summon the reeve. "Only wives of free men can wear that dye now. Didn't you hear? You hadn't. Not that it matters." You sigh, untie the apron, and replace it with your dull saffron-colored one. It still smells faintly of onion broth, but at least it won't get you fined. Probably. Historians still argue how strictly sumptuary laws were enforced, whether they truly kept social order or just gave bored officials something to do. What's clear to you is this: clothes tell stories, and you've never been allowed to write your own. You pass through the square and eye a young woman wearing a velvet trim on her sleeves. Velvet. She must be married to someone important. Or stupid. You watch two older women glance at her, then at each other. There'll be whispers before sunset. Market stalls bloom like makeshift gardens. Bright bolts of wool, sacks of barley, fish on slates, even dried apples that look like they've already given up. You barter for salt, just enough to stretch the stew, and browse a pile of second-hand combs. A merchant scolds his daughter for letting a customer touch dyed silk. "Don't even let her look like she can afford it," he mutters. Silk. You've never even touched it. That's clothing for nobility, or more realistically, clothing for paintings of nobility, and even they look uncomfortable. You hear shouting at the other end of the square and turn to see a young man being questioned by the reeve. He's selling boots. Nice ones. Too nice. Someone must have accused him of dressing above his station, or maybe the reeve's just hungry for fines again. You slip behind a cart of turnips, hoping to avoid notice. One stall sells ribbons and laces, all dyed in legal shades, of course: teal, russet, drab green. You run your fingers along a strip of coarse linen edged in simple embroidery, the kind you could maybe afford with 3 good weeks of spinning and no unexpected funerals. You don't buy it. You head toward the edge of the market where a group of women are selling eggs, thread, and gossip. One of them, Marjorie, a butcher's sister, has an actual wimple with pearl trim. Likely fake pearls, but still. She catches you staring. "Gift. From my cousin," she says too quickly. "A hand-me-down." You nod, because that's the correct answer. A young boy walks by wearing a tunic patched with at least 4 different fabrics. One woman tuts, not out of judgment, but understanding. Clothing is not just status, it's warmth. Armor. Evidence of luck, or the lack of it. There are rumors, always rumors, that a merchant's wife up north was fined 5 shillings for a pair of red boots. Supposedly, she cried for 3 days and still wore them the next Sunday. That's bravery, or foolishness, or just really nice boots. You pause at a booth selling dye herbs. The vendor is old, with fingers stained from centuries of boiling roots. "Walnut husk for brown," he says. "Madder root for red, woad for blue if you dare." He winks. You consider buying a tiny pouch of madder root. Not to wear it, just to know you own something forbidden. But you don't. Instead, you buy dried marigold petals, harmless and useful. They make good tea. And no one's ever been fined for tea. You begin the walk home, your apron scratchy, your coin pouch lighter. The hem of your kirtle catches on a thorn bush and tears a little. You don't swear aloud, but only because an elderly priest is hobbling. Back inside, you sit by the fire and examine your market haul. Salt, marigolds, a second-hand comb missing 2 teeth. Modest treasures. You tuck them away carefully, like secrets. You glance down at your saffron apron. Legal. Faded. Safe. But you still think about the velvet sleeve and wonder what it feels like to wear something dangerous and not be punished for it. It's the kind of morning where your joints creak before your door does. You wake to the chill leaking in through every wooden seam of your home, the air thick with damp and the smell of smoke from someone else's early fire. As you stretch, you hear bells. Not the usual church bells, those come later, but small ones, attached to a cart's harness. That sound means only one thing. The physician is in town. You dress quickly, wrapping your thickest shawl around your shoulders, and hurry toward the square. You're not sick. Well, not yet. But when the physician visits, people come whether they need a cure or just a story to tell later. The cart is painted in deep red and lined with brass. A wooden sign hangs askew from its side. Cures, tonics, and God's guidance. The physician is already unloading baskets of dried herbs, glass bottles, and strange little tools you wouldn't want anywhere near your skin. He wears black robes, stiff, with starch, and over his face, a beaked mask, leather, with glass lenses over the eyes. You try not to stare, but it's impossible. The beak tilts toward you like a curious bird. You suppress a laugh or a shiver. The mask, you've heard, is stuffed with lavender and sage. To filter the bad airs, someone whispers beside you. You nod, because that's what people do when they don't understand something, but don't want to be caught not understanding. Historians still argue whether plague doctors were useful or just ominous scenery. Either way, you wouldn't want one by your bedside unless things were very, very bad. The physician greets the crowd without speaking, simply gesturing for people to form a line. A woman with red eyes and a hoarse cough steps forward, holding a handkerchief like a surrender flag. The physician examines her tongue, feels her pulse, and then gives her a roasted onion. For drawing out the ill vapors, someone behind you mutters helpfully. Works better if you bury it under your bed. You're not sure about the onion logic, but then again you once rubbed vinegar on your forehead because a traveling friar said it would prevent dreams about wolves. Behind the physician's cart, a younger assistant sets out small charms and amulets. For strength, he claims, and female ailments. You raise an eyebrow. The label just says, Moonstone and Hope. You wander over to a display of tonics, bitter-smelling concoctions, labeled with hopeful names like Lung Elixir and Clean Blood Draft. You sniff one and recoil. It smells like boiled shoe. You think about buying the lung tonic anyway, just to say you tried. But it's 2 pennies and you've got soup to think about. Nearby, a monk is shouting verses about purity and divine punishment. Illness is but the body's rebellion against the soul's sin, he cries. A chicken in someone's basket clucks angrily at the noise. You step back toward the edge of the square where others are doing the same. Watching, not engaging. The spectacle is part of the draw. It always is. A woman whispers that the physician once saved a magistrate's wife from coughing herself into the grave. Another insists he's never cured anyone, but always leaves richer. Someone else just wants to know where he gets his beak masks. A young girl tugs your sleeve. Her brother has a fever, and their mother is afraid. You help her approach the assistant, who offers a charm and a bitter syrup. Rub his chest with goose fat, he adds. It draws the fever downward. You nod because that's what people do. Goose fat, garlic, leeches, there's no shortage of advice. The trick is knowing which remedy is truly medicine, and which is just noise wearing a velvet ribbon. As the cart prepares to roll on, the physician raises one gloved hand and sprinkles something into the air. Lavender petals, maybe. They fall like scented confetti. The crowd watches, reverent or simply curious. He mounts the cart, gives a short bow, and disappears down the muddy road, the bell on his harness jingling like a secret. Back at your home, you sit near the hearth and unwrap the only thing you bought, a tiny cloth sachet filled with mint and lavender. You press it to your nose and breathe. It smells like your grandmother's chest, like the priory. like pretending things will be fine. Your cousin arrives an hour later. Her husband's back is worse again, and she asks if you know a charm, or maybe a poultice, or maybe just something warm to lie on his spine. You do what you can: oil, herbs, and gentle words. You should be the physician, she says, only half joking. You shake your head. Too expensive, you say. And I don't own a mask, she laughs, but it's the kind that ends in a sigh. That night, as you scrape your dinner pot clean and stretch your sore knees by the fire, you picture that beaked figure vanishing down the road. People say they bring death. Others say they delay it. But you? You think what they really sell is something harder to bottle: hope. The next few days pass in a blur of chores, coughs, and gossip. You mend a ripped hem with numb fingers. You soak beans overnight and forget about them in the morning. You try to sleep but wake too early, your thoughts spinning like a dropped spindle. Then the messenger arrives. He's young, wind-chapped, and clearly exhausted, his hose splattered with mud and his breath frosting in the air. You hear the knock before you see him, and by the time you open your door, he's already moved on, leaving behind a sealed parchment, tied with coarse twine and marked with a wax stamp you don't recognize. It's not addressed to you. Not really. It's for your household. And since your household is, well, mostly you untie it. It's a summons. The local manor is requesting your presence, which could mean anything from needing a midwife to needing someone to sweep ashes under a rush mat. Or maybe they just need a body to blame for something mildly inconvenient. You sigh. You put on your good shoes, the ones that don't let in more than 2 pebbles at a time. You comb your hair and wrap your cloak. Then you set out, stepping carefully around puddles that have ambitions of becoming ponds. The manor looms at the edge of the village, timbered, tall, and smug. Its wooden beams are intricately carved, though the shutters need rehanging and the yard smells faintly of wet chicken. Still, it's the grandest home for miles, and its residents rarely mingle with yours unless something's broken, bleeding, or breeding. A steward meets you at the door. His face is the architectural embodiment of disapproval. He doesn't invite you in so much as herd you through. You're led to a chamber that smells of rosemary and damp fur. The fire crackles politely. A woman in her 30s reclines on a chair covered with cushions. Her gown is made of deep plum wool, lined in rabbit fur, and her wimple sits like a starched halo around her face. She gestures you forward. "I heard you have steady hands," she says, voice smooth and distant. You nod. "My husband's hawks brought in a rabbit," she continues. "I'd like the hide cured and stitched for gloves." You blink. This is not what you were expecting. You agree, of course. She offers you a cup of watered wine and a seat by the fire. You sit cautiously, unsure whether the warmth is a courtesy or a test. Around you, servants move like ghosts. One stokes the fire, another pours hot water into a ceramic basin. You glance down at your own hands. Rough from scrubbing, pink from windburn. The idea of making gloves for someone with that much plum wool feels like a riddle. The rabbit skin is handed to you, fresh, damp, and heavier than you like. You know what to do, though. It's not your first time handling animal hide. You wrap it carefully, offer a shallow curtsy, and prepare to leave. She stops you. "Do you read?" You hesitate. "A little," you say. "Good. I need someone to copy a charm into my prayer book. My maid's handwriting is atrocious." This time, you smile. A task you actually enjoy. You're given a small quill, a bit of ink, and a faded scrap of parchment, with a charm written in Latin, barely legible, and probably copied incorrectly to begin with. You do your best, inscribing the spell in neat lines at the back of her psalter, right after a prayer for safe childbirth. When you're done, she inspects your work, nods, and tucks the book away without further comment. You're given a heel of bread and a slice of hard cheese for your trouble. No coin, no thanks. Just a quiet dismissal, and a door closed gently behind you. Historians still argue whether noblewomen held real power in their households or merely served as beautiful hinges for their husbands' ambitions. But here, in this moment, it's clear. The woman in the plum gown wields influence, the ability to summon, request, dismiss. Even her whims come embroidered. You head home through falling mist, the rabbit hide wrapped in old linen and tucked under your arm. You'll cure it tomorrow. Maybe make a pair of your own gloves first. Nothing fancy. Just something to keep the wind from cracking your knuckles. That evening, as you scrape ash from your hearth and watch the fire settle into quiet coals, you think about the Psalter. Your handwriting was better than hers. You know it. You think about the ink on your fingertips and wonder whether that counts as a blessing, or maybe just a stain. The rabbit hide rests by the fire. You imagine it slowly becoming something useful, something warm. Maybe tomorrow you'll stitch your own initials into the lining, not for anyone else to see, just for you. It's laundry day. You knew it from the moment you woke to the soft slop of water being hauled and the low clatter of washboards. Your arms already ache in anticipation, and you haven't even left your bed yet. Well, bed might be generous. It's more of a straw-stuffed invitation to back pain. You pull on your work kirtle, wool still damp around the hem from yesterday's mist, and wrap your linen sleeves tight. Outside, a fine drizzle hangs in the air like a poorly kept secret. Perfect weather for cold fingers and wet ankles. The washing site is down by the stream where a dozen women have already gathered. They've staked their usual spots. Flat stones nearest the tree roots are prime real estate. You're late. Again. You nod greetings, find a patch of grass, and begin soaking linens. Some are stained with soot, others with worse. You don't. Ask questions. No one does. If you can't scrub it out, you beat it against the rocks and hope the stains surrender from shame. The river's too cold for comfort, and your fingers go numb within minutes. A woman to your left hums a bawdy tune about a knight and 3 nuns. You laugh through chattering teeth. Laundry, you've decided, is the great equalizer. Whether you're a merchant's wife or a shepherd's niece, everyone's back aches the same. The soap is homemade, ashes, lard, and a prayer, and it stings your scrapes. You scrub harder. Historians still argue whether women in rural England had much free time between household duties. But one look around this riverbank tells you everything you need to know. If this is leisure, you'll take medieval boredom any day. One girl, barely 12, is wringing out a chemise with both hands, her face set in grim determination. Another is drying socks on a branch and singing to a baby tied to her back. Multitasking isn't new, just unappreciated. Across the stream, a woman glares at a shirt that refuses to come clean. "The devil's in this stain," she mutters. Or boiled gooseberries, hard to say. She throws it back in the water like a challenge. A chicken wanders too close and gets its feet wet. It squawks indignantly, then struts away like someone insulted its lineage. Someone makes a joke about adding it to the stew pot. Everyone laughs except the chicken. You glance at your own pile, shirts, napkins, rags, and one very sad apron. You tackle the apron first. It smells faintly of fish. You don't remember when that happened. Possibly last week, possibly always. Laundry isn't just a chore, it's a message. Clean linens say your house is in order, your mind is focused. Your body, though constantly exhausted, isn't surrendering yet. You remember a story your aunt used to tell, that if you died wearing dirty underthings, the angels would scowl when they arrived. You never knew whether to laugh or worry. A loud splash breaks your thoughts. One of the women has fallen in, only ankle deep, but enough to soak her skirt and pride. She stands up, dripping and swearing softly in Latin. You didn't know she knew Latin. You lend her your cloth to dry her hands. She thanks you with a look that says, "Today isn't the day." Eventually your arms start to shake from wringing. You hang the linens on low branches and flattened hedges, praying the drizzle doesn't turn into real rain. A gust of wind flips a tunic into the mud. You curse under your breath. The angels probably hear that too. The walk home is slower. Each wet garment adds weight, and the path feels longer when you're lugging proof of your labor. You reach your door, muscles sore, hands raw. You boil water to warm your fingers. It smells vaguely of turnips, but at this point, Warmth trumps fragrance. While the water simmers, you think about the stream. How many words have been whispered over it? How many insults scrubbed out with ashes? How many apologies carried away in ripples? Laundry may be mundane, but it holds the quiet stories of women who can't rest, of clothes that keep secrets, and of stains that only come out if you're brave enough to admit they're there. You hang the linens above your hearth to finish drying. They sway like strange white flags of surrender or survival. By nightfall, your hands are stiff again, but your clothes are clean, your hearth is warm, and the apron only smells faintly of soap now. You sit by the fire, your shoulders drooping, in time with the rising steam, and whisper a small victory to yourself. One more day. One more wash. One more stain defeated. You made it. You wake in the dark, not just early morning dark. This is pre-dawn, lamplit. Only the bakers are awake kind of dark. The kind where the world still feels like a secret. You blink yourself into awareness, tug your cloak around your shoulders, and step outside into a mist so thick it's like walking through wet wool. Somewhere in the village, a rooster considers crowing, then thinks better of it. You sympathize. Today is market day. That means gathering whatever scraps you've managed to make, grow, or mend over the past week, bundling them into a basket, and trekking to the market square in the hope that someone wants to trade for them, or if you're really lucky, pay for them. You pack a few lengths of dyed thread, 2 jars of pickled turnips, and a wool scarf you finished stitching last night. You tuck in a small pouch of dried rose hips, just in case someone's feeling romantic or scurvy-prone. You also bring a rough-smelling soap cake. It's misshapen but functional, like most things in your life. The walk to the market is muddy and slow. A wheelbarrow wobbles past, pushed by a man with more ambition than balance. A donkey brays in complaint. Birds pretend not to notice any of you. By the time you reach the square, it's humming. Not loud, exactly. Just the sound of effort. Of coins clinking, of bread crusts cracking, of gossip tumbling between trades. You claim a patch of space between the cooper's stall and a woman selling eggs of dubious freshness. She greets you with a nod and a yawn. You lay out your goods on a piece of cleanish cloth and try to look like someone worth bartering with. Your first customer is a boy who asks if the soap is edible. You tell him no. He buys it anyway. "For my sister," he says. "She's terrible." You don't ask. Next, an older man squints at your rose hips and mutters something about witch berries. You explain their medicinal use. He buys them, but tells you not to curse his goats. You nod solemnly. A merchant from a neighboring village stops by. He's dressed too fine for the mud, but he knows it. He fingers the scarf you made, compliments the weave, and offers 3 carrots and a cracked cup in trade. You accept. The carrots are fresh. The cup can be mended. The compliment is already fading. Historians still argue whether women dominated informal rural markets or if men controlled trade from the sidelines. Here, you can tell, women run this world, one beetroot at a time. The men stand behind them, holding bags or pretending to supervise. The market is more than barter. It's theater. One woman tells the story of how her hens fought off a fox. Another complains about her neighbor's goat, which she swears is cursed. You join the laughter. You've met the goat. It might be true. A friar passes by collecting, alms with one hand and a honey cake in the other. He blesses your wares, then takes a turnip. You don't argue. You trade a jar of pickles for a beeswax candle, 2 buttons, and a sprig of dried lavender. By mid-morning, you've shifted half your goods and bartered for everything from twine to 3-day-old bread. You're not rich, but you're not empty-handed either. The fog begins to lift, revealing the sun like a coin dropped behind clouds. The square grows louder, busier. A juggler appears and drops his pins immediately. Someone claps anyway. You overhear a heated discussion about a rising fever in a neighboring village. A woman whispers that it's the plague again. Another insists it's just bad broth. You wrap your scarf tighter. By noon, the market smells like cheese, sweat, and overripe apples. A baby screams, a dog steals a sausage, a pot crashes to the ground and everyone flinches, until it's clear it wasn't a body. You pack up slowly. Your thread is gone, your scarf is gone, and your pickles are gone. You've gained a mismatched spoon, a scrap of velvet, and something that might be soap, or might be lard. You'll find out later. Back home, you unload your treasures and stash them away like squirreled hope. The candle will keep you company. The carrots will stretch into soup. The cup has a crack, but holds water if you don't mind sipping sideways. You. Think about the scarf you traded. Where it will go, who will wear it. Maybe it ends up in another village, wrapped around another neck, warming someone else's version of a hard day. That thought makes you smile, because market day is more than trade. It's proof you're still part of something, that what your hands make has value, that the world, for all its mud and misfortune, still needs pickles and thread and terribly shaped soap, and that maybe, just maybe, you're not alone in the making of it. You're jolted awake in the middle of the night by the bell, not a church bell, not the rhythmic clang of the smithy either. This is something heavier, slower, an iron-plated knell that echoes off every damp stone and timber beam in your bones, the death bell. It rings once for a man, twice for a woman, 3 for a child. Tonight, it rings twice. You sit up, blanket tangled around your knees, and strain to hear more. Nothing but the wind and a dog barking somewhere past the fields. Death is part of life here. That's what people say, usually while staring into their porridge, or trying to convince themselves that the rattle in their chest is just hay dust. Still, the bell never feels ordinary. It feels final. By morning, you learn who it was. Joan, the baker's wife. You didn't know her well, but you knew her bread. It was always warm, faintly sweet, and somehow better than anyone else's, even when she used the same flour. She had 3 children, one still nursing. The village adjusts itself around the absence with grim efficiency. A neighbor takes the baby, for now. Her eldest, maybe 12, just stares. Someone places rosemary above her door. The baker keeps baking. You've seen this before, of course. Women vanish in waves. One day they're stirring soup. The next, they're a name on someone else's lips. The hardest part is how quickly everything carries on. You try to help. You bring broth. You offer to sweep. The baker thanks you without really seeing you. He's measuring oats before you leave the threshold. Later you overhear someone saying it was a fever. Someone else says it was childbirth. A third mutters about a curse, something to do with the moon and the color of her curtains. Historians still argue whether villagers truly believed these superstitions or just needed explanations when the world offered none. You think maybe it's both, or maybe it's grief wearing a mask. You walk past the churchyard that afternoon. The gravedigger's already there, knee-deep in clay. He doesn't look up. The earth is hard. His shovel hits stone more than once. You don't linger. That night, you light the beeswax candle you traded for at market. It flickers with purpose, casting fat shadows on your walls. You whisper a few words, not quite a prayer, not quite a memory, and sit in silence. It's a strange kind of mourning, this distant grief, a sadness shaped like a gap in a line where someone used to stand. You think about your own name, how it might sound when whispered after the bell rings, what someone would bring to your threshold, what they'd forget by next week. Then you scold yourself. That's no way to end the day. Instead, you recall the warm bread, the flour on Joan's sleeves, the way she used to hum when stirring. You wonder who will sing now, and if the tune will be different. In the morning, the bell doesn't ring, but that doesn't mean it won't tomorrow. You hang rosemary on your own lintel, just in case. Today begins with shouting, not angry shouting, not quite, but that same brittle volume that means something official is happening, and people should be listening whether they want to or not. You peer out from your doorway, squinting into the morning light. A small cluster has gathered around the village notice post, where a traveling official, boots too clean, cloak too blue, is nailing a piece of parchment to the wood. He doesn't explain much, just says the law's changed. Again. Something about land rights and inheritance, something about grain levies, something about fines for improper behavior, which everyone assumes means women, somehow. You step closer, trying to read. The orange script is elegant but cramped. The kind of ink that assumes everyone can read when most women can't. Luckily, a merchant's daughter nearby is muttering it out loud as she reads. You tilt your ear. Apparently, if your husband dies and you're under 30, you're no longer automatically granted the lease to your shared plot. It will pass to his male cousin unless you remarry within a year. You try not to let your face show anything, but the woman beside you just mutters, "Again?" and spits in the dirt. That about sums it up. Historians still argue whether women in the 15th century had any meaningful legal agency, or if their so-called rights were more ceremonial than real. Based on this parchment, you're not feeling optimistic. You walk away with a tight knot in your chest. You're not even widowed, and somehow you feel poorer than yesterday. Later that afternoon, you pass through the edge of the village and see a different sort of legal spectacle. 2 boys being whipped for stealing a loaf of barley bread. There, maybe 12. One cries out, the other stares straight ahead. The bailiff says it's justice. A woman nearby mutters, it's cowardice. No one argues. The law in your world is less a system and more a mood. Sometimes it remembers you exist. Sometimes it doesn't. When it does, it's rarely good news. You once heard a priest say that the law of man is second to the law of God. You think that's convenient, considering both are usually interpreted by the same kind of man. You make a quiet stop at the small shrine of St. Margaret, tucked into the side of the old grain store. You leave a handful of dried flowers and whisper your worries into the wood. Margaret is said to protect women in childbirth and legal danger. You figure she's overworked. As you leave, you cross paths with a landowner's wife, all velvet sleeves and sour looks. She lifts her chin and doesn't return your nod. Her shoes are spotless. You glance at your own feet, thick with mud and cracked leather. There's no law against dignity, you remind yourself. Not yet. That evening, your neighbor, a woman who once tried to represent herself in a property dispute and was told she had a dangerous tongue, invites you in for soup. She stirs the pot with a heavy ladle and lighter words, tells you a story about a widow in York who dressed as a man to reclaim her farm. Another about a nun who rewrote court records to help her sister inherit a field. Some rules, she says, weren't written by saints. You smile into your bowl. Later, you write your own name on a scrap of cloth and tuck it into the hem of your shift, just in case someone needs to remember it, one day. Because even if the law forgets you, even if it twists itself around someone else's favor, your story matters, your hands matter, your name matters, and that, for tonight, is enough. The rain begins before sunrise. Not a storm, just a steady whispering drizzle that seems to settle directly into your bones. You pull your cloak tighter, but the damp finds its way through the seams, soaking your sleeves and your patience. Today is one of those long, quiet ones, the kind that's half waiting, half working. You stoke the hearth, you mend a tear in your apron, you pick tiny stones from the barley sack, one by one. Outside, the village is slow to stir. Rain muffles everything, hooves on mud, gossip across thresholds, even the crow of the rooster. It all sounds like the world speaking through wet wool. You step outside to fetch more kindling and find the paths nearly empty. A single boy runs past with a bucket on his head, pretending it's a helmet. You smile. He skids in the mud, falls, and gets up laughing. Inside again, you light the tallow candle you've been saving for gloomy days. Its flame sputters, then steadies. You sit beside it with a bit of spinning, wool thick and damp between your fingers. You hum while you work, though you're not sure of the tune. Maybe your mother's, maybe yours now. Historians still argue whether women's labor on rainy days was lighter or just less visible. You laugh at the thought. Wet wool doesn't spin itself, and neither do soup bones boil on good intentions. The afternoon creeps in like fog. You chop onions, peel turnips, stir porridge. Your hands work without thinking, muscle memory born from endless repetition. Somewhere, a child wails. Somewhere, a cat knocks over a bowl. You remember a time when you thought days like this were dull. Before you understood how many small tasks hold the world together. You fix a loose hinge on the cupboard with a bit of twine. You press dried sage into the window cracks. You tuck wool into your boots. Quiet victories. A knock at your door. It's the girl from down the path. Isabel, red-cheeked and wet as a sponge. Her mother's fallen ill. Can you help? You don't. Hesitate. You grab the bundle you always keep ready. Herbs, cloth, a chipped bowl, a wooden spoon. You follow Isabel through the rain, your boots sloshing through puddles, your breath clouding with each step. Her mother is in bed, shivering despite the fire. You touch her forehead, hot as a kettle. Her lips are dry, her eyes flutter. You mix willow bark and elderflower. You press a damp cloth to her brow. You whisper nonsense comfort while Isabel watches from the corner, knees pulled to her chest. She doesn't ask if her mother will recover. She's too smart for that. You stay until evening, changing the cloths, coaxing her to sip warm water. Isabel finally drifts to sleep with her head against your shoulder. Before you leave, you pull the covers tight. You place a sprig of rosemary on the windowsill, just in case. Back home, you strip off your wet cloak and wring it over the hearth. Your arms are sore. Your back aches. You're hungry, but you feel solid, like part of something, like the kindling that holds the flame. Tomorrow will be another hard day, another walk, another task, another storm to sidestep. But tonight, for a moment, it's enough to have tried, to have carried water, spun wool, stirred soup, and steadied a child, to have done the invisible work, the kind that makes history. Even if no one writes it down, you lie down in the dark, candle out, rain tapping softly on the shutter. Your breath slows, your eyes close. The house exhales with you, and in the stillness, you remember. You are not forgotten. You are the thread that holds the fabric. You are here. Now, the rain has quieted. The fire, still glowing faintly, gives off a warmth that barely touches your toes. The hearth crackles just enough to remind you it's there. Steadfast, like the rhythm of breath. You lie back, eyes closed, wrapped in the soft hush of a home that has known many like you. Women who carried water, whispered prayers, and stitched their names into the hems of plain linen shifts. Outside, the world is still wet and silvered. Smoke rises slow from thatched roofs. Somewhere, a hen murmurs in her sleep. A child turns beneath wool blankets and settles. And you've made it through this day, a day of rain and rosemary, of forgotten laws and remembered names, a day of quiet strength and quieter survival. Let the aches slip from your shoulders now. Let the breath settle deep in your chest. The world will be there in the morning, muddy, flawed, and beautiful in its small, defiant rituals. But for now, you can rest. Close your eyes to the candle's last flicker. Let the story melt into dream. And drift. Drift like steam from a teacup, like fog through the hedgerow, like a name whispered across time. Sweet dreams.